different holidays. The nice thing about 4th of July, it's just great. You just get to eat and blow stuff up. There's really nothing else going on. I'm excited about the 4th of July. I'm excited about our party later today. Everybody coming to the party, I hope. We have enough food and activities to probably accommodate twice as many. So come and enjoy. See, I think there's no better way to celebrate the birth of our country than by eating and doing things like water slides and eating and maybe a squirt gun fight or two and perhaps some eating and more eating. I like what Jim Gaffigan once said. He said, I don't normally have a burger and a brat and a steak all at the same time, but it is the 4th of July, so it is a holiday. As we join today in celebration, and I think that most of you probably have off tomorrow, I ask that you at least take a minute or two during the next 2 days and contemplate what it is that we truly have to be thankful for. Just being able to sit here this morning, because of so many brave men and women throughout history that have fought, as Bishop was saying, fought for our freedom, fought for us to have the right to gather and worship. It's wonderful. Our country has undergone so many struggles and changes throughout its history, and it continues to go through many struggles and changes as of late. But there's no denying the fact that this is still the greatest country in which to live. A little history quiz this morning. Does anyone remember who the second and third presidents of the United States were? Sheila knows, of course. The savant in the church. Everybody knows the first president was Wright. Second president, Sheila? John Adams. Third president? Thomas Jefferson. Right. Did you sing the song? Washington, Adams, Jefferson? Okay. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Did you know what day they died? July 4th, 1826. They both died on the very same day. Wow. July 4th. These men were good friends in their youth. But after Adams was replaced by Jefferson, some political disagreements separated them, and they never saw each other again. However, they were eventually reconciled for the last 14 years of their lives, and they exchanged many affectionate letters. When John Adams died at the age of 91, his last words were, "Thomas Jefferson still lives." But unfortunately for him, and because they didn't have telephones and stuff at the time, they did not realize that was true. You see, at the age of 83, a few hours beforehand, during his last hours in his home in Monticello, Virginia, Jefferson passed in and out of consciousness. And in 1826, just a few hours before Adams died, Jefferson died surrounded by friends and family. His last words were, "Is it the 4th?" And he heard yes, and he breathed his last. The 4th of July, that was such a meaningful thing for our forefathers. Independence. So much so that Jefferson waited. He couldn't wait to die until it was the 4th. He had to wait, He couldn't die until it was the 4th. Amazingly, the final words of these two founding fathers were uttered on the very same day, July 4th. It was the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It's really breathtaking to realize that tomorrow marks the 240th anniversary of that world-changing day. 240 years. Doesn't seem like this country should be a lot older than that. Especially when you visit countries, and those of you that have traveled, into Europe, and you've seen houses, that are older than our nation. People in other parts of the world are always quite amused, and I think sometimes put off by the pride that Americans take in their country. And if you aren't sure what I mean by American pride, just take a stroll through Walmart tomorrow, and you'll see all kinds of American pride. How often have we heard speakers declare we're the greatest nation on earth? Well, we're certainly the strongest nation, right? And the wealthiest. Because of that, we surely have more responsibilities, I think, than any other nation on earth. What does Scripture say? To whom much is given, much is required. You know, whenever I hear someone say how proud they are to be an American, or proud of their children, or proud of their football team, or proud of whatever they may take pride in, I'm reminded of the words of the Christian singer Wayne Watson. He said, "The older I get, the less there is to be proud of, and more there is to be thankful for. I'm more thankful for my family than I am proud of them, because I realize most of what they are is completely out of my hands." He writes, "Most of what has happened to me in my career is not a result of me walking the streets of Nashville with songs, trying to get them cut or trying to get a record deal. He said, most of it has been a blessing from God. So my thankfulness is growing," he says, "while my proud list is becoming much shorter." Today is a day to be thankful. Thankful for our freedom. Thankful for our family. But most importantly, today is a day to be thankful for our faith. Think about your faith for a minute. How did you come to know God? How did you come to love Christ and have His love enter your heart and life? Where were you when you first had that eye-opening experience to the relationship that Jesus offers each and every one of us? Everybody, think back. Now, my next question is this: who was there with you? You see, we're all here in this church this morning and in our walk of faith because of someone else. Someone else. You know, very few people came across it alone. In fact, I'm not sure I've heard of anyone since St. Paul that discovered Jesus on his own. Maybe it was a parent. Maybe it was a friend or a pastor. But someone in your life prayed for you. Someone in your life introduced you to God. God's plans don't change a whole lot, do they? You know, He still works in the same way. God calls out to people through the means of other people. You and me. That's our calling. What did Jesus tell the disciples? Go into all the world and make disciples. Go to them. You know, we're still commissioned to help spread the gospel, to show God's love and plan for this world. We're still called to that. That's still the best way. Jesus reaches others through us. You know, the gospel story this morning from Luke is interesting. There's so much in there that you can touch on. Jesus and you know, the disciples, and they're going out and they're doing these things and what they see, and then they come back and they're excited because things are happening, and then Jesus, you know, completely blows them away and says, "Oh, I saw Satan fall from heaven." I mean, you know, where did that come into? We weren't even talking about that. But He does something interesting. We see in Luke Jesus sending the disciples out to minister to the townfolk, right? Look at it again real quick, just in the beginning. "Now after this, the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them in pairs." So they were going out 2 by 2, just ahead of Him, to each and every city and place where He was planning to come Himself. So Jesus said, "Go on and ahead of me. I'm going to be there." Kind of like you're the street team a little bit. You're to get raise excitement and kind of announce that I'll be here. So you do a few things, and then I'll show up and the party will really start. But what were they supposed to do? It wasn't just go in and announce, "Hey, this cool guy's coming to town." He said to them, He said, "Go and say that the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into His harvest." Okay, it says, "I send you out as lambs amongst wolves." That's scary. "Carry no money belt, no bag, no shoes, and greet no one on the way. But whatever house you enter, first say, 'Peace be to this house.' If a man of peace is there, your peace will rest on him. But if not, it will return to you." And He said, "Stay in that house, eating and drinking from what they give you. For a laborer is worthy of his wages. Do not keep moving from house to house. Whatever city you enter and they receive you, eat what is set before you. And heal those who are in it who are sick. And say to them, the kingdom of God has come near to you." Okay, so what's Jesus doing? He's sending these guys out 2 by 2. And He says, randomly go to houses. Just go and meet people. And if they invite you in, go into their house. And eat with them. And eat whatever they give to you. And pray for them and heal them. So He's given them some authority to do some cool stuff. But it's still a scary thing, right? I mean, just going up to some stranger's house and knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about our Savior, Jesus." I mean, how would that go over in today's world? Jesus doing here? He's sending the people door to door to pray and minister and heal. And all of this before he comes to town to pray and heal and minister to people. Now we got to wait up just a second. This is crazy, radical kind of stuff that Jesus is wanting his people to do. At least in our mindset, right? Today's day and age. It's the only crazy people in today's day and age go randomly door to door, knocking on doors and talking to people. Regardless of whether you're trying to tell them about Jesus or you're trying to sell them a vacuum cleaner, it's still crazy and people don't like it. It reminds me of the story of two young Mormon missionaries who were going door to door, and they knocked on the door of one woman who was not at all happy to see them. The woman told them in no uncertain terms that she did not want to hear their message and slammed the door in their faces. To her surprise, however, the door did not close. In fact, it almost magically bounced back open. She tried again, really putting her back into it, slammed the door again with the same amazing result. The door flew back open, revealing the two missionaries. Convinced that one of the young zealots was sticking their foot in the door, she reared back to give it a third slam. She felt that this would really teach these guys a lesson, but before she could act, one of them stopped her and politely said, "Ma'am, before you do that again, you should really move your cat." Going door to door, whether it's preaching or selling something, just isn't something that we see a whole lot anymore these days, do we? Why is that? Well, it's just a different time. First off, no one's usually home, at least during the day. Most families work. Everybody works. And if they have worked all day, you can't go out at night because what happens? They're tired. They don't want to be bothered. They've been around people all day. Husband and wife have worked. Most people don't want to be bothered with strangers at the door. But it's a different time. It's different in days past, isn't it? Think about 20, 30 years ago. What was it like back then? If you will, take a stroll with me down memory lane to what it must have been like 20 or 30 years ago when someone came to your door.
My doorbell rang. This is weird. It's a different feeling when your doorbell rings today opposed to 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago, your doorbell rang. That was a happy moment in your house. It's called company. Be sitting there on a Thursday night watching TV. Your doorbell rang. The whole family shot off the couch. Oh my God! Put the lights on. Somebody's here. We got people. The whole family went to the door. The kids were in socks. They slid up to the door. Nobody looked to see who it was. Right? You just opened up the door. You were like, oh my God, look at that. Look at us here. And you'd ask them, what the hell are you doing here? And the person would be like, I was in the neighborhood. I thought I might stop by, see how the kids are doing. They're like, oh, come on in. We're gonna have some cake. Your mother had a little Entenmann's. There's some Sara Lee crumble cake. Just in case company came over. She made an announcement when she bought it. She's like, listen, nobody touch this cake. This is for company only. Those crap muffins, those are for you, baby. You better hope to God somebody comes over so we can cut the cake. She put her cake in the middle of the table, proud of it. And she put it right in the middle. Cut yourself a slice. Want a cup of coffee? We're gonna do want some Sanka? Dad, that's old school. A lot of the young kids are looking at me like, what is that, an iPhone app? What the hell is Sanka? mother had a tin, brown and orange tin of Sanka, ready to go just in case the company. She put a big pot on the table. Go ahead. Nobody had a cell phone back then. If your house phone did ring, your father stood up and said, "Nobody get that phone. We got company." And you lost track of time. 2 hours went by. You were like, "We gotta get out of here." That's okay. Next time we're gonna come by you. Like, "Yeah, my door's always open." Now your doorbell rings? It's like, what the fuck? Your own mother's crawling across the kitchen floor. Get down, army crawl. Army crawl, get in the closet. Go get the sword in the living room. Somebody get the sword underneath the couch in the living room. There's a sword there.
It's so true, isn't it? Nobody ever comes around unannounced anymore.
I can fix that for you.
Except for Felicia, she actually does come quite unannounced all the time. Here he goes on to say, he says that if you ever show up at someone's house unexpected, you have to sit in your car and call to ask if it's safe to approach the house. You have to give notice. Someone comes to your house, it's always a bad thing. No one comes to your house and they're friends anymore. You know, we live in a different world than the one in which Jesus appointed 70 emissaries to go out 2 by 2 and tell the towns and villages about him, to heal the sick and to tell everyone who would listen the kingdom of God is near. You know, we could do that today, but I think the results would be very disappointing. You know, we don't need to go door to door and offer to heal people. We have doctors and hospitals for that kind of thing. And more than that, people just wouldn't be that happy to have us knocking on their door. In fact, there might be some old lady army crawling with a sword through the window. So what about this lesson still applies to us? How are we today to function in this calling? How are we, and those that are called to go out, and each one of us is, because it's part of being a Christian, is to go into the world and spread the love of God. Because, you know, the message of Jesus hasn't changed. I think there's some things in this story that we can see, and things that we can apply to our life today. I think the first thing that we need to see is this, that Jesus still calls us to reach the world. But it hasn't changed. Jesus never meant for his body to become an exclusive club centered only on its own needs. Unfortunately, so many churches have become that. A place for like-minded people to gather. And anybody that's not a part of that, doesn't look like them, doesn't act like them, doesn't think like them, is not welcome in their midst. We're called to reach the world, the whole world, and everyone that includes. There was an interesting story in Reader's Digest sometime back by Elise Miller Davis titled, "When Someone is Drowning, It's Not Time to Teach Them How to Swim." Mrs. Davis tells of it sitting near a swimming pool one day and hearing a commotion. A head was bobbing in and out of the deepest water. Mrs. Davis saw a man rush to the edge of the pool and heard him yell, "Hold your breath! Hold your breath!" Then a young lady joined in screaming, "Turn on your back and float!" Their voices caught the attention of the lifeguard, and in a flash, he ran the length of the pool, jumped in, and pulled the man in trouble to safety. Later, the lifeguard said to Mrs. Davis, "Why in the name of heaven didn't somebody holler just one word? Help! When someone's drowning, it's no time to try to teach them how to swim." Do you understand that there are people in our community who are barely staying afloat? Families are disintegrating, young people are becoming chemically addicted, middle-aged people are facing life crises that would blow our minds. Just because of the strategy of going out 2 by 2 to door is outmoded, doesn't mean that the need has disappeared. Doesn't mean that there aren't still people in their homes alone every night. There aren't still people at our jobs alone every day that just need somebody to come and share a ministering hope, word, and peace to them. The need has not disappeared. Herschel Hobbs tells about Roger Shelton, a pastor from Nashville, Tennessee, who was in Busan, Korea, on an evangelistic mission. With an interpreter, Shelton visited a man who had creeping paralysis. Both of his legs were paralyzed, and the disease threatened his life if no cure could be found. Entering a dimly lit room, Shelton found the man crouched on the floor. Speaking through an interpreter, he told how the stricken man had come to talk with him about Jesus Christ. The Korean replied, "I know. I have been waiting for you a long time." The interpreter responded by saying that they had arrived at their appointed time, to which the Korean said, "That's not what I meant. My people are Buddhist, and I have been a Buddhist, but Buddha gives me no comfort." Then he pointed to the Korean Bible. He noted that he had read through it twice. It tells of a great one, and I have waited for someone to come and to tell me more about him. He said that he had believed that if the Bible was true, God would send someone to tell him. Shelton told the man about Jesus. He readily believed. And as they were leaving, the man thanked him for coming. Shelton said, however, that the man's final words shook every fiber of his emotional being. He said, "You almost waited too long." Those words haunted Roger Shelton, and they ought to haunt us. You almost waited too long. See, there are people in our community that are in desperate straits, and Christ has called us to minister to them. When? Now. Before it's too late. See, Jesus still calls us to reach the world. And just as importantly, he calls us to identify with those that he came to save. See, that's what the disciples did. They went in, and Jesus said, "Whoever welcomes you in, you go in. Identify with them." And what else did he tell them to do? Eat whatever they give you. Nothing helps you identify with a different culture than eating their food, does it? Anybody ever been on a missions trip and had to eat something that you probably wouldn't have ever wanted to eat in your life before? But you did it. Why? Because you wanted to identify with them, and it would be rude not to, and you would be seen as different, or they would see themselves as different in your eyes. You see, so many Christians today are just like the Pharisees than they are like Jesus. The Pharisees set themselves apart from the unrighteous people. They were more concerned that they did not become sullied than that the sick and dying were to be saved. When we were doing our Wednesday night Bible study, it amazed me. Jesus goes down to the man that had been laying by the pool of Bethesda for 36 years. And it was quite amazing. And you know, the guy's waiting, and there was a superstition that whatever sick person could get in the pool first would be healed. And Jesus sees this guy and says, "I've been here 36 years. I have no one to help me into the pool. So I just continue to lay here and not be able to move, not do anything." So Jesus has compassion on him. What does he do? He heals him. And he tells the guy, he says, "Take up your bed. Walk. Go your way." So the guy, excited, picks up his bed and starts heading anywhere but the pool of Bethesda, where he's been for 36 years. And what happens? The Pharisees see him walking by. And what do they say to the guy that they know has not walked for 36 years? Why are you carrying your bed? It's the Sabbath. Their whole focus wasn't at all on the fact that this guy is miraculously walking after 36 years, but the fact that he was breaking their laws. It's interesting how the Pharisees got so focused on what they thought was right and wrong, that they lost sight of all the people in the middle. See, Jesus wants his followers to have a heart for all people. He wants us to identify with the last and the lowest. As I said, it's interesting that Jesus told those that he was setting out to eat and drink whatever's set before you. And sometimes that can be a test of faith all by itself. You ever been on a mission trip, like I said, been in the homes of people at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale? You know that not everything that's set before you looks appetizing or even sanitary. But the worst thing that a follower of Christ can do is make a person who is in need or in the middle of a crisis feel rejected or feel inferior. Maybe they've not exercised the kind of discipline in their lives that we would prefer. Maybe they didn't frame their request in a theologically correct manner, but they are still people for whom Christ died. And they are precious to Him, and they are in need, and that's all that should matter to us. A young hospital chaplain was serving his internship in a large teaching hospital. While on call one night, he was summoned to a room of a woman whose baby had been born stillborn a few hours earlier. "We want our baby baptized," the young mother said, cradling her lifeless daughter, her husband at her side. Her name is Nicole. The intern didn't know what to do. He asked the young parents to wait a few minutes and then come to the chapel. Meanwhile, he tried to find a more experienced chaplain to take over. Fortunately, he was unsuccessful. What was he to do? What was he to say? Should he baptize a stillborn? The situation had not been covered in any of his theological training or his training in pastoral care. He tried to think of what he could say to minister to this young couple in their grief. When they arrived at the chapel, the words that he'd hoped to say did not come. Instead, and almost without realizing what he was doing, he took a tissue. He wiped the tears of the eyes of the parents, then wiped his own tears. And then he touched that tissue to the baby's head and said, "Nicole, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." He said nothing else. You see, his tears were more eloquent than words could have ever been. Just as Jesus wept over Jerusalem, He wants us to have a tender heart and tender concern for all of God's children. You know, there are people in our community who are barely keeping their head above water emotionally and spiritually. And Jesus calls us to identify with them and to minister to them. But there's one more thing that we need to see in this story this morning, just in the sending out aspect of what Christ called the disciples to do. One more thing about going out into this world. Whether it's 2 by 2, door to door, or whether it's wherever God sends you, in whatever environment that you find yourself. I think the biggest thing, if our eyes are open, we'll recognize that sometimes, maybe all the time, those we minister to will do more for us than we will do for them. Here's the one reason that Christ would have us reach out to the world. We will discover people who will save our souls. See, we think we're doing work for them, and we always step away and say, "Wow, I learned so much from that experience." Story after story has been told. Jerry Anderson wrote a book called Hummingbirds and Hollyhawks, and he tells about a time when, as a guest preacher in a small mountain community, he was invited to a young couple to bless their home. He writes, "The dwelling itself was a typical mountain shack. The house was up on poles with several wooden and broken steps leading to the porch. An old swing hung by one chain at the far end of the porch, and a straight-back pole chair stood leaning against the wall. Anderson was startled by a voice from the inside. 'Come in,' the woman said. 'We've been waiting for you.' She wore a print dress, and her brown hair hung softly about her face," Anderson writes. "She was prettier than I remembered her. The man came in from the back porch carrying a bucket of water with a dipper in it. He set it down, dried his hands on the freshly pressed overalls, and shook hands. Anderson looked around the room. There was a table held together by some protruding nails and wire, and 2 high-backed chairs like the one on the porch. The kitchen boasted an old-time wood stove with 8-pound irons sitting on the back of the stove. The little bedroom had a straw mattress on the floor and nothing more. One could see the ground through the cracks in the floor, which is an advantage when you sweep," the wife said, "because everything falls through the cracks." "Are you ready?" the young man asked as he dried the palms of his hands on the front of his overalls. Anderson took out his Bible, read some appropriate scriptures, and was ready to pray the prayer of dedication when the humble couple each took his hands and knelt on the floor. So there they were, Reverend Anderson and this humble couple kneeling on that hard, bare floor, holding hands and thanking God for this home and invoking His blessings on the couple. As they stood, the young woman turned to the husband and put her arms around his neck and said, "Honey, now we have everything." Moments later, they stood on the front porch with arms around each other, waving goodbye to Reverend Anderson. Even the old rooster seemed friendlier, he thought, as he drove down the gravel road, looking back at the house. Had he missed something? No, the house was as bleak and bare as before. But now he realized that he had not asked God to bless a house, but to bless a home. This young couple was just starting out life with none of the world's goods. Yet they felt that because of their faith and their love for each other, that they had, quote, everything. Remember the warmth of their hands, the light in their faces, remembering he had to agree. They did have everything. They were blessed with much more than the world could give. Now you tell me, who ministered to whom that day? Those who have gone as missionaries to countries like Haiti, where the people are unimaginably poor, will tell you that they've met people who put them to shame spiritually. I remember talking to one of the pastors when we had our one of the bishops that was here when we did our convocation. And he said when he traveled to Africa, he said it was so frustrating to him because they had terrible sense of time. He said church is supposed to start at 10 o'clock and no one would be there. And he said at 11 o'clock still no one would be there. And he said I was so frustrated and I tried to, well, he was talking, excuse me, I mixed the story up. He was talking to one of the bishops from Africa. And he said that their time was terrible. Because the church was supposed to start at 10 and they would run late and everything like that. And he said he was frustrated and he confronted them about it. He said, we start at 10, we'd appreciate it if you'd be timely. And he said, well, I apologize, but you have to understand this is not my culture. He said, when in Africa, he said at our churches, he said people walk for miles, 5, 10 miles. He said the thing is, we know they're coming. They're always going to come. We don't start until they get there. And if it takes all day for them to get there, then we wait all day until they get there. He said, you Americans, he said, you have no idea if your people are showing up for church on Sunday. He said, so you've got to start on time. It's interesting. People are so hungry for God in other places. When you meet people like that, people living in conditions that we would term unacceptable, but praising God for what they have, it can indeed save our soul. Show us that there is so much more to this life than what we can gather. Going out 2 by 2, going out into the community, that just doesn't happen anymore. People won't like it. People won't receive it. Maybe they should, but they won't. But the one thing I know for sure is this, that God still calls us out, just in a different way. He calls us to the people around us, the gym, the grocery store, the office, and certainly to our own families. God has called us to the people around us. He's called us and given us a mission and told us to continue to take it out to them. You see, no one comes to God on their own. They are loved into His kingdom. Loved into His kingdom by us. By our attitudes and by our examples. Why do we do it? Not to build a bigger church or to impress people with our goodness. We go out and we minister. We show the love of Christ because there are people out there that are in need. There are people out there that need what we have experienced. And we need to see God work in their lives. We go out not as people who feel superior to the world, but as caring people who identify with them in their hurt and in their need. And we go out with the hope and the realization that when we minister to the least and the lowest, sometimes, oftentimes, perhaps all the time, we encounter Christ. And that will save our souls. See, be the people of Christ to this hurting world. You'll be amazed what God can do through you. Our nation was founded by brave men and women who had one hope and dream. What was it? To have the freedom to worship God as they wanted. That was their hope. That was their dream. And look where their dream and look where their vision has brought us. 240 years later, and we're still free. We're still free to worship God. We're still free to praise Him. You know, how many of you have looked out this window once worried about armed men running in here to shoot us down? You may have been looking out this window a few times saying, I wish Jake would shut up so we can get out of here. It's such a pretty day outside. But we have no worries that someone's going to run in here and hurt us for sitting in here, gathering, worshiping. 240 years later, and we're still free. Let's thank God for the past, and let's continue to make Him a part of our future. Amen. As we prepare to take our offering this morning, I want to make mention of a few things. First, we would like to take a